ain't no way we're going to become a member, associate or otherwise, of the UK Commonwealth. I just don't buy it.
I don't buy it either.
It's like the whole idea of 1776, is completely betrayed by the idea of us being in any way, manner, shape, or form associated with and or subordinate to the British Crown. Okay? And of all fucking people, Donald Trump is going to sign off on that? Ain't no way.
You're watching Capital Cause, and my name is Danny, and my guest's name is Tom Luongo. Tom, fan favorite. Thanks for coming on the show, my friend.
Thank you for having me, Danny. Good thing we can put this one together, right?
Yeah, for sure. Let's dive right in, Tom. So many things going on in the world. For you, however, what is front and center on your radar screen at this moment?
It's the delusion of Europe that they actually matter. I hate to be blunt and crude about it, but the temper tantrum that Canada and the UK and to a lesser extent, and to a greater extent, the EU, and to a lesser extent, the UK are throwing over the idea that the United States is not going to go to war on their behalf to fight and die for their behalf in Ukraine is really kind of funny. And it's also sad, but it's also indicative of what their plans are. In the last couple of weeks, they've really showed their hand as to where they're going over the course of the next 6 months. Well, what is it? March, so 7 months. With Christine Lagarde announcing that they want to move to the digital euro in October, and now their savings and investment utility, whatever the hell they're calling it, and all the threats of they're going to bail in all the excess savings of Europe. This is very clear that what their plan is. And I was chatting with some people recently, and I've had this kind of version of reality in my head for a long time, that they need the war in Europe to be able to blame the Russians on why their capital markets are blowing up, and they can blame everybody else as to why their capital markets are blowing up, while they are literally purposefully setting the stage to bankrupt most of Europe in order to default on all their debt, issue perpetual bonds, and start over again. And they, as Alex Craner and I have talked about for years, in order for this plan to work, they need access to collateral, specifically energy collateral, that they don't have, right? So this is why every move that you've seen the United States make over the last couple of years has been in service of denying Europe energy collateral.
Is this why there's talk about Canada becoming part of the EU? Because doesn't that solve the energy collateral problem should Canada join the EU?
Sure. If Canada were to join the EU, and Mark Carney would go back on all of his environmental nonsense and say, yeah, we can have pipelines from Alberta. We can do a big round of fiscal and stimulation for infrastructure purposes and defense purposes, and then they use all of that as a cover to finally unlock Alberta, unlock British Columbia, unlock all of that, unlock Northern Ontario where there's tremendous gold resources, and then use that as a means by which to solve their mineral and energy problems, which is why Trump going after Greenland, which is why Trump going after Canada, is a clear shot across the bow. Everybody makes fun of this, but it's not. This is strategic. Trump understands what's going on here. So let's back up for a second, and let's ask the question: how are they going to? What's the how? Right? I did a podcast with my friend Chris Sullivan a couple of weeks ago, and all we kept talking about: don't ask why capital markets move, ask how they could move, and then you can map people's incentives, and that will more likely tell you why things moved. Because then when you see people deploy capital in a particular way, and they use these mechanisms to do it, that means that now you can ask yourself, well, why would they do that? It didn't make any sense why they would throw $10 billion to bomb the price of gold or whatever it is, right? So I'm getting at here, Danny, is that the primary form of the savings in Europe is German bunds, the safe haven asset of Europe, and Italian BTPs, which traded generally a 1 to 1.25% premium over German bunds. Now, what have I been screaming about for 3 years? that Lagarde and Yellen were running a yield curve control operation while Powell was raising rates in order to try and keep the European bond market and sovereign debt market from exploding. It was very important to them that they maintain credit spreads without having them blow out too far too fast. Now, why is that? Well, it's because they wanted to continue to keep the money flowing into Europe and create the illusion that their bonds had markets, right? Outside of defined benefit pension programs and insurance, that can't invest in anything else, right? Think German pension funds. Where are they going to put their money? You think they're allowed to put their money in, Chinese stocks? I don't think so, right? We have the same problem here in America. Like if you've ever worked in finance and worked with people, you know that everything has covenants and every fund has a prospectus, and they got to follow, and the fund managers have to follow the rules of the fund. Well, same thing goes for insurance companies, pension funds, and the rest of it. So the majority of the savings that they are targeting, that they want to go and monetize and bring and effectively nationalize, is in the form of German bonds, now Italian BTPs. Now in order to keep the money flowing into Italy, you've got to keep a lid on Italian bond prices or Italian bond yields, or not, so that they still look reasonably. It keeps borrowing costs for Italy under control, and it also makes it relatively attractive because they're not trading in junk bond yields, right? So, today, for example, you have the German 10-year and the Italian 10-year trading at about 100 basis points between each other, and around, the Italians around 3.8% and the Germans around 2.8%. But so this is important because it allows everybody to think, okay, well, there's not a crisis, so my money's relatively safe. And as long as I'm getting better than inflation, or, you know what I mean? It's not
Right.
not a terrible investment. And hell, it's the only game in town. Now, at the same time, we've also had a massive run in the DAX, the Eurostoxx 50, and the various stock markets, because the reality is that smart people, fund managers, family offices, and the rest of them understand that this is nonsense. These bonds are massively overpriced. So you have this natural tension within the European market. So what they're doing is threading the needle, right? What they're doing is playing this game. And what is Donald Trump going in and doing? Nope. You're not threading that needle anymore. Tariffs. There goes your trade surplus. Tariffs. Canada. There goes your trade surplus. You don't have the ability to beggar thy neighbor. Keep your bond yields lower than they should be, but and your currency weaker than it should be, given the trade imbalance, right? Europe runs a trade surplus with the United States. You think the euro should be trading at $1.30, not $1.04, or $1.08. But the reason that the euro is trading at $1.08 is, of course, because Europe has no prospects in the future. This is all just financial engineering. This is all just fake and gay shit that is downstream of USAID funding and National Endowment for Democracy and all those magic money printers that exist within the U.S. government to create a Eurodollar market that keeps the dollar that they're able to buy reserves with, and then and they can just play the game. What am I getting at here? What I'm getting at is that that when you look at internally within European politics, it's very clear that France is making a move to run the fucking EU. Okay? We placed Germans in charge to betray the Germans. Okay? Look at what's going on with the downstream of the German elections. Are German populists going to be allowed to take office? No, of course not. They're being frozen out just like they were under Merkel. Friedrich Merz is acting like the second coming of, like, I don't know, like the big forehead Hitler. And, it's just all silly. At the same time, Emmanuel Macron is going after Marine Le Pen now, wanting to put her in jail, right? We have, shoring up Romania so that they can continue building out the big air base to, down the road, attack Russia with. I think that the protests.
You also have Macron virtue signaling on behalf of Denmark through Greenland. Mm-hmm. So France came out the other day, or through Macron, and said, "Oh, the U.S. will not take Greenland, or else this will be like a sovereign."
Oh yeah, again, Macron can talk a lot, but at the end of the day, remember, don't ever forget, folks, that the French don't like the Americans. Let's not kid ourselves. Like, I was talking to Dexter White the other day, and he had to remind me that during World War II, like the Italians, who were our enemies on the other side of the war, fighting for the Axis, surrendered to us far faster than the Vichy French did. De Gaulle hated the Americans. Why do you think Nixon had to close the gold window? Because de Gaulle was trying to steal all. I mean, not that I had any real problem with de Gaulle, but at the end of the day, there's old animosity between the United States and France, just like there's old animosity between the United States and the UK, because at the end of the day, we're not European. We're the colony that got away, and they're still butthurt about it. Sorry, folks, that's just the way it is. And that's been my analysis for years, and every day it proves itself correct. So now I want to close the circle on this. When you think about what they're planning on doing, and you have a majority of savings and pensions and everything else in BTPs, Italian BTPs and German bunds, then what do you have? Well, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to do exactly what they've been saying they're going to do. They're going to create a sovereign debt crisis by spending too much money on new defense and all these new fiscal plans, blaming Russia for potentially a false flag against them, right? Everything is happening to set up the collapse of the European sovereign debt market. And Trump is helping that along, not because he worked for them. That's a bad read. Trump is just doing that because they're assholes and he wants to break Europe. They understand what's happening. They've always understood that either way, I've always said this, they set up flow charts in which both outcomes, they win. Get the United States to fight with the Russians. We get to have World War III. We get to blame, the blow up of the capital markets on the big war. Trump doesn't go along with this. Well, we then start the big fiscal push to defend ourselves, start the process of breaking up NATO, declare the Americans are the enemies of Europe as well. We have to now spend trillions of dollars on defense and making the world safe for climate change. And we're going to trash our own markets anyway. And then they're still going to get the war that they want because they're going to provoke the Russians into attacking them or set the groundwork that everybody would not blame the Russians at all for, I don't know, lobbing missiles into Paris or some shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or
you're looking for great deals on gold and silver coins and bars from a company that you can trust, then you've got to check out the good folks over at Pimbex. This year, I've really gotten to know these guys, and all I can say is you're not going to deal with a better group of people. They're a family-owned gold and silver online bullion company offering the essentials and more at industry-leading prices while always providing first-class top-tier service. That's PIMBEX.com. And if you're looking to convert some or all of your retirement account into real gold and silver, give Pimbex a call. They'll help explain the process and get you started on the right path. Your support at Pimbex also helps support the channel. So reach out to Pimbex today. You won't be disappointed. And make sure to tell them Danny sent you.
They're pretty much asking. They're pretty much asking for it because they've been telegraphing what they're going to do. They're saying that we need 5 to 10 years to build up a military defense force for Europe. And you're thinking, like, if you're the Russians, are you just going to sit there and just let them build up their military, knowing that they're going to attack you? Like what?
And then this thing with Heathrow Airport over the weekend, where the diesel powered, there's no diesel power plant diesel generator backup at Heathrow, one of the most important airports in the fucking world. Like, you think that's like, I know that they did that for climate change reasons. That's no nonsense. Like, that's a single point of failure. It's a classic British. It's a classic British intelligence operation where you can, or set up. I don't say it was an operation, but this morning we found a passport there. Found a Russian passport.
Are you serious?
Like, are you kidding? No, seriously, it was all over Twitter this morning. I know. We sit back and we laugh about this shit.
Like, Tom, I'm getting flashbacks.
I know. I'm getting the vapors over here, right? It's insane, right? But what else? What else are you going to do? So, like, they're desperately trying to gin up some kind of false flag and reason why the Russians would attack them. The Russians have every reason to attack them. But again, let's remind ourselves that the Russians can't project force beyond the borders of Poland because they have not credibly shown that they can do military logistics that don't involve rail. And the Russians use a different rail gauge than the rest of Europe. It stops at the Polish-Ukrainian border. All the Russian, everybody would have to get off the friggin' train and then move to a Polish train in order to be able to, it's not going to work. Like, the Russians have never wanted, and like the idea that they want to invade Poland is just like, it's just, or any of this stuff is just, it's just otherworldly. It's just funny, but whatever. So clearly what they're worried about is, of course, rapprochement between the United States and Russia, right? Every move Trump makes is to deny them access to energy collateral. Have you noticed this? That's what the JCPOA was about. That's why he killed it. That's why he's okay with Erdogan having moved into Turkey, to Syria. And I can see Erdogan wanting to go along with that for 2 reasons. I can think of 6 reasons. Well, I'll give you 2 off the top of my head. 1, to maintain control of the energy flow through Turkey, because he's made himself the gas hub of the region, to get it to feed energy into Southern Europe, either through Turk Stream or through coming out of Azerbaijan and the Caspian. I can't remember the name of the pipeline. Doesn't matter. It's some terrible boondoggle pipeline that's makes no money. And the other, of course, is to make sure that Israel's not control Syria. So that he has a continuous border with the Israelis and Turkey. There's under no circumstances was Erdogan ever going to let the Israelis have control over Syria. So in my read, both the Trump administration and the Russians were like, yes, Erdogan, please move into Syria in order to stop everybody's regional ambitions. The Israelis are big mad about this. The Iranians are big mad about this. Seems to me like that's the win, right?
Who's behind these anti-Erdogan protests in Turkey going on right now? Who
this
stands
is
to benefit?
It's a funny thing, right? My spidey sense immediately maps to, well, the mayor of Istanbul, I can never remember his name. And I've heard multiple people tell me, I've heard multiple people say that he's not anybody else's asset. I've heard other people say he is, and that he's very, Istanbul is a very cosmopolitan city. So it's the least Turkish of all the cities in Turkey. And so therefore, if there was going to be outrage over this guy, over Erdogan jailing his political opponent, at the same time that the Europeans are jailing their political opponents, so what would the normie think here? Well, they're jailing Georgescu in Romania. Now Macron is going to try and get rid of Le Pen. What is Erdogan doing? He must be doing the same thing, and he must be working for the EU. But that's not true. That ignores history. Erdogan and the EU don't get along at all, because they've treated him like the help, and he hates it. And Erdogan is a far more complex figure than this.
And you had the German foreign minister talk about this the other day, saying that Erdogan must respect democratic institutions or elections.
There's your tell. There's your tell. Like, I'm sorry, whether the mayor of Istanbul, I apologize for not remembering his name, whether he's anybody's boy or not, doesn't matter. He's carrying their water. Okay, if saying that he's Davos's boy is too much for you, then just say, look, he's But
it's easy to control people through ideological means. If you're like ideologically inclined one way, I mean, this guy, he may be ideologically inclined towards democratic governments, and so controllers can pull his strings in that direction, control him.
Right. And they can pull everybody else's strings in that direction. It's not like Turkey has been, hasn't been under color revolution conditions since 2016. Like, they've been working the Turks for, especially in Istanbul, for forever and a day. Like, so Erdogan staying in power does not work for the EU. So what's the big plan? Again, go back to my original argument here. Like, let's go all the way back to to Italian BTPs and German bunds. With all the stuff about bond spreads is literally just, forget all the jargon. It comes down to make them attractive enough to allow people to be able to continue moving into them in order to build up a massive pile of them, so that when you foment the sovereign debt crisis in Europe, which Europe is doing, they're fomenting this on purpose, because they've always said they need to get rid of all the debt, issue new collateral, and start with a new currency and fiscal integration under the European Commission with tax and spend authority. issuing issuing infrastructure bonds and all the rest of it. They've been trying to get this done for years. They've been trying to slowly do it. Now they have to do it. Well, how do you do that? Well, you nationalize everybody's savings and you bankrupt the Germans and the Italians, who are two of the three legs on which the entire European Union rests. So who wins in that scenario? Well, Germany is bankrupted and Italy's bankrupted. The only one left standing is France. This is Macron's power play. And von der Leyen is, she's not a German. She's not there to represent Germany's interests at all. She doesn't. And, but you lull the German people into a false sense of security by knowing that there's a German in charge of the EU Commission, and they, think that the EU is still working for them. They're not, because that's how the EU has been sold to the average German. That, it may suck for us, but at least we're in charge of it.
I see. Tom, this in my view is kind of a nothing burger until I see further developments, but everyone's talking about it. And of course you are you're one of the preeminent voices when it comes to the all roads lead to London thesis. So, over the weekend, or actually I think it happened on Friday, Donald Trump put out feelers to join the UK Commonwealth. There was an article from The Sun talking about a secret offer to be made by King Charles. And Donald Trump retweeted it or reposted it on Truth Social and said, "Sounds good to me." And this set off a frenzy online about this entire thing.
So there's two things I want to ask. So two things I want to ask everybody who's going crazy about this. One, do you think that, there's one. The Sun headline was Britain to make a secret offer to the United States. It said nothing about the Commonwealth. Do you think Trump actually read the article? Or do you think he read the headline?
Definitely the headline.
Okay. So they got what they wanted. They got it's like getting their talking, it's like getting their soundbite, right? They work, the media will work you to get you to say the thing that they want you to say out in the context of a larger thing, but then they can take that little thing out, right? So they got Trump to say the wrong thing. Ain't no way we're going to become a member, associate or otherwise, of the UK Commonwealth. I just don't buy it.
I don't buy it either.
It's like the whole idea of 1776, is completely betrayed by the idea of us being in any way, manner, shape, or form associated with and or subordinate to the British Crown. Okay? And of all fucking people, Donald Trump is going to sign off on that? No, I would expect
MI6 did to his administration during the first term.
What's that?
After they spied on him?
Yeah, MI6 was MI6, and he knows this. He knows that MI6 was intimately involved with Clinton he knows all this. So the whole concept that, if anything, I tweeted back out. I'm like, I use the Pawn Stars meme. I'm like, rejoin the Commonwealth. Best I can do is I'll take Canada off your hands. That's the way I read this. Let's have it. Let's sit down and have a negotiation. Oh, those are your terms. How about no? You know what I mean? How about, you've got to be kidding me. This whole thing just seems like classic British propaganda. Trump makes it, into something it's not, Trump steps in it, and we'll see. If at some point the king decides that he wants to get out from underneath these, Davogian assholes in Europe, which I don't see, then what he's really asking for is help. And this is a cry for help. But I don't believe that. Not with Charles. I don't believe that at all. So
yeah, Charles seemed to be he's unlike his mother, Queen Elizabeth. He seemed to be very behind the Great Reset, and seems to get more so aligned with the Davos crowd as opposed to his mother, who was kind of like this, part of more of this monarchist circle. She was interviewed during the initial referendum vote out of for Brexit, and she said, "Give me 3 good reasons why the UK should stay as a member of the EU." Like, she was one of the leading voices against the EU. So King
in
Charles,
her way, the way as much as she was allowed to be, right? But yes, that was the closest thing that Elizabeth could say to get us the fuck out of this insane asylum. She can't actually say that. This is like watching, this is like watching the hostage videos where the person is saying reading the script, but at the same time, all their body language was like, "Get me out of here!" You know what I mean? So like, no, can you speak freely? No, I can't. That kind of thing, right? So, yeah, and absolutely, I think that there was a coup in September 2022 over Liz Truss's mini budget, which I'll be honest with you, I don't even know that Liz was alive for most of the summer, to be honest with you. She's 99 years old, for Christ's sake. She could have died at any point. And then they announced it along with the coup in order to, bless the whole process. Let's not kid ourselves. Like, I think they're playing fast and loose with, the Pope right now for the same reason. I don't know whether the Pope's alive or dead. Has anybody seen him recently? I'm asking an honest, serious question. I don't know because I don't follow this crap on a daily basis, but I do know. Right. So, I mean, this is for something for people. If the Pope has been seen since, he got sick a couple of weeks ago, fine. I'll retract any implication about what's going on with the Pope. But, then again, verify that the video you saw wasn't AI. Verify, trust, but distrust, but verify, folks. Like, all of this stuff is real, right? So, we're all going to believe what we want to believe ultimately at the end of the day. But the goal here is to destroy Germany. This is Macron's big push. And, it was funny, like listening to reading this note from a friend of mine on Twitter this morning, where he said that to me. I'm like, oh my God, that's the final puzzle piece. Because I had this whole, they need war to do this, but there was always kind of that underpants gnomes thing in my head, like war, blah, blah, profit, digital euro. And there was always a little missing piece to the whole puzzle, the whole story. I'm like, oh, right. Why would they do that? Well, they would do that because they want to also bankrupt the Germans and the Italians. The Italians because because Giorgia Meloni is, a traitor to the cause and has aligned herself with the Americans, and the Germans because they can clearly read clearly read election results and polling data, which says that, Germany is more than happy to, once this generation of boomers, German boomers, are gone, Germany is lost to them. Like everybody, Germany's the kids in Germany they're all out. It's the same thing with the kids here in the United States. They're all out. They've all jacked out of globalism. They don't know what they believe in, many of them, but they know they don't believe in that, and that's enough.
Well, they're all revolutionaries, either on the left or the right.
Mm-hmm. Well, be careful about the word revolutionary, because revolution, of course, implies violence. Now, on the left, I believe that completely, because it's always leftists that are truly, truly violent with the notable exception, I guess, of the Nazis. And it is a notable exception, mind you, but, go back and look at, China, Cambodia, it's all leftist ideology. But at the end of the day, let's not kid ourselves. Does Europe, do we as Americans, why should we care about any of this? This is the question that a whole bunch of Americans are now asking the right question in their frame, in their mind. What do we give a fuck about what the British think of us? What do we care about what the Europeans think of us? These places are the birthplace of both Marxism and fascism. Every truly totalitarian ideology and political movement has come out of Europe. And Europe always chooses war as opposed to peace and trade whenever they get into trouble. They always choose it. I got a couple thousand years worth of history here. Like, this is not, I'm not making shit up, and I don't need to I don't need the well actually crowd from fucking Reddit to go, well, actually, it's not always true. Like, fuck off. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, you're going to give me one counter example and then that's supposed to carry the day. Like, I don't know what friggin' world you live in, but that doesn't work, Spurt Boy.
They're missing the forest from the trees.
Yeah, well, no, because they can't help themselves because they can't help themselves because as I've said before, like there's no known cure for this kind of thing other than like aging them out. So I don't know. I mean, this is where I am this morning, and I think that this is what's going to shape the next 6 months worth of headlines at every level. Like the real story here is that Europe wants to default in order to bankrupt their people and build back better with a digital euro. And the schmoozing that's going on right now is whether or not they can figure out ways to get Trump to sign off on bad deals.
And again, it goes back to your first point. It seems like they're actually baiting Russia to attack them.
Sure.
Every day I see like a new headline about how we've got to do conscription, we've got to build up our military, European military defense stocks are all up. There's talk about once the U.S. leaves NATO, this will allow room for a European military arm to form. And again, if you're from the perspective of the Russians, if they're telling you they're going to come over to your house and shoot you tomorrow, are you just going to wait around till tomorrow comes?
Right. No, you're not. And that's the point. And then, but what they want to do is they want to threaten all this. Oh, we're just doing it for defensive reasons because the Russians are implacable and Putin is evil and he's the 14th coming of Hitler and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, so that then they can get morally outraged when he attacks them, and then they can just continue to flood the zone with all of this fucking tiresome moral preening about how they have European values. Like what? European values are totalitarianism. I'm sorry, they are. Get over yourselves, folks. You don't have rights. I've read the constitutions. I've read the European Union Charter. Like there ain't no individualism there. There ain't no freedom there. Like you guys don't have anything. You live in an unelected technocratic superstate. Like the USSR called itself democratic, for Christ's sake. So did the Chinese, by the way. So under Mao, they called themselves democratic. Like everybody does. They wrap themselves in the moral high ground in order to, bribe people or make them live under the delusion that they still have a say in the matter. And they use fear and they use the boogeyman in order to keep people in line. And it's not hard. And you've all been, and the worst part of that is that everybody here that I'm talking to about this that would argue with me have all been educated in this shit. They've all read 1984. We've all read Brave New World. We've all read all these things. And the problem is that you're making the people who would argue with me about this right now would be arguing from a perspective that the people who are running their countries, see those books not as warning signs, but as operating manuals. And what, you can't see it? And you think the Americans are falling, towards authoritarianism? Are you kidding me? Like, we have an authoritarian system in the U.S. We have the same crappy administrative state problem that you have. We just have it with different legal means because we have a different legal system. So therefore, we have to do things differently in order, the shitbag Europeans and American traders that have architected this system here in the U.S., and they've done end rounds around the constitutional protections that we have by creating whole areas of law that don't exist and are incompatible with our system of law. But we've been betrayed by this. And now everybody thinks that this is normal. Like we have leftists in this country who believe that the Constitution is a living document, like that of Britain. It's not a living document. It's the law. And this is the problem. So those are European values grafted onto America. And then we wound up with almost the exact same system that they have, but we have different mechanisms by which to enforce that system. So we have socialized medicine in the United States. We call it Obamacare. It looks like a private system because money changes hands, but it's not. Because it's not a free market in medicine. It's nothing close to a free market in medicine. or anything else. Pick any other, we have so many regulations on cars in the United States that that's you ask why the cars are so unaffordable. It's because of the regulations. You ask for, the safety regulations and the emission regulations and this, that, and everything else. It doesn't matter whether they're a good idea or a bad idea from your perspective. What matters is that those regulations add cost. That added cost creates these downstream effects, which does this, which does this, which does this, which does this. And you take that away, and all of a sudden we get a free market in cars and a free market in transportation. What's the goal? Bind up the transportation system so that it's as sclerotic and unresponsive to users' needs as it is in Europe. No different. It's the whole purpose of this is that Europe is this competitive, the United States is this competitive, and the whole point is, as opposed to Europe choosing to go up and try and match us by deregulating, by this, by that, and everything else, they've chosen, nope. We're going to take over the United States and we're going to bring them down to our level. That's it. That's like the big story. And now that we've said no, now they have to, in a panic, ditch the old system and build it and create a new one. But they won't give up control in the process. They still have to have their totalitarian, if not even more totalitarian, top-down control than they had before by defaulting on all the existing debt, stealing the savings of colonial Europe, using that as the collateral because they can't get the energy collateral. So now you got to steal it from the people and then reissue it as a fully programmable 100% tax compliance and surveillance central bank digital currency, which does away with the violence of the private formation of capital, because that's a pesky capitalism thing, and we don't believe in that. We're too wise and insouciant as Europeans to believe in something as tawdry as capitalism, because we're all good communists. Great, run with that. As an American, literally go run with that. I have zero interest in being your friend anymore.
And even the countries that call themselves communist, i.e. China, they have a more open economy than Europe. Xi Jinping said in 2020, don't compare us. I think it was like a comment made by Bernie Sanders or someone else on the left comparing China to Europe. And Xi Jinping said, no, we are not a social welfare state like Europe is.
No,
you'll notice that they aren't, because Xi Jinping also said that we don't want to incentivize, for lack of a better term, laziness in our country.
Mm-hmm. Bingo. There's many things to be China. Yeah, and this is communist China, right? And don't get me wrong. I'm still very wary about whether or not Xi is an actual doctrinaire communist or not. It's a different thing, right? What they are in Europe, it doesn't matter. And it's what's really funny, Danny, is that when I do this, when I reduce everything down to, look, you're just fucking communists, just get over yourselves. They're like, no, well, actually, we're democratic socialists, or we're this, or that. Like, no, fuck you. It's the same thing. Like, at the end of the day, you don't believe in the private formation of capital. You don't believe in private banking. You don't believe in this. You don't believe in that. You don't believe that the individual is superior to the sovereign. Blah blah blah. You don't believe any of that.
They're technocrats. I mean, they're technocrats.
They are. And they're all and that crowd of upper, of IQ 115 or IQ 108 midwits. 115 is too smart for this. IQ 108 midwits, both of the female and male variety, are just smart enough to be suggestible of these different ideas, and just abused enough by the existing system to have trigger points installed in them to then turn right around and use that as a means by which to get them to abreact against that which triggers them. And in this case, that trigger is Donald Trump. Why? Because Donald Trump is everything they wish they weren't, is everything that he represents, everything that they hate.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, Trump is many things, but he's not ugly. He's blunt, but he's not ugly. They're ugly. Elizabeth Warren is ugly inside. She's an ugly, bile-filled, despite-filled, horrible person. Do you ever, they ever watch Trump with women? He's always terribly deferential to them, charming and all that. And they all think it's his facade, and it's not. Because then when they meet him, they're all like, yeah, he was really nice. I don't know what I was expecting. I'm like, he was really nice. And he was genuine. I'm like, yeah, he's many things. He's a complicated man. But the truth of the matter is that you can make, with
Because they
media,
start believing the
you can
caricature
make anybody
of
into anything. Like, you know what I mean? You can make anybody into anything. They can, you can take me out of context and turn me into a friggin' raging friggin' communist if you really wanted to. Like, there's enough hours of that you could probably, piece together some clips and then, do the suggestible thing. And then I don't know.
Right.
I'm sure somebody could do it if they wanted to. I don't think I'm worthy of that. But, hey, if you want to waste your time with that, go right ahead.
Hey, Tom,
But
really quick, I know we have to hop off soon, but I want to get your take on this before we sign off, and that is this weird love triangle that we're seeing between the U.S., Russia, and Iran. Now, the U.S. has been trying to remedy relations with Russia, but is adversarial to Iran. But Iran has alliances with Russia. So a while back, about a week ago or so, Russia tried to broker a new nuclear deal between the U.S. and Iran. That was denied. But where are we at now? What's going on there between? If are we going to see a war with Iran? And then if so, where does that put Russia?
I don't think we're going to see a war with Iran. I think this is a very intense negotiation. I think Iran's axis of resistance is going to be destroyed. And that includes allowing the Israelis to wipe out what's left of Hamas. One of the things that was interesting about Steve Witkoff's interview with Tucker Carlson that everybody missed was that he basically said Hamas can be brought in to the political situation in Gaza after they demilitarize. Now, those who were reflexively sympathetic to Hamas or to the Palestinians say, well, if you do that, if they demilitarize, then the Israelis will just kill everybody. Very possible. Not going to deny that the Israelis don't have that track record. But if Trump says you're not going to do that, then the Israelis will stop. Because, like it or not, Donald Trump doesn't work for Israel. That's not to say he's not influenced by them. It's not to say that he doesn't want them to survive. So what has to happen, and I really do believe that this is what has to happen, and I also believe that this is going to be a very, very difficult thing to map, and it's going to trigger everyone. And no matter what position you take, there will be evidence to be able to take the counter argument. Okay, no matter what you do, because it's such a complicated situation. Okay, but when you stop to look at everything that's happened, I said earlier, Turkey moving into Syria made the Israelis big mad. It also made the Iranians big mad. So now Turkey is kind of like the bully in the room telling the Iranians back the fuck off and the Israelis back the fuck off, right? Largest army in Europe, Turks.
But Israel took a large chunk of southern Syria.
Well, they took some of it, but they didn't take the whole thing. They wanted the whole thing. They wanted to go all the way to the Euphrates River so that they could put an air base. They can use the air bases, use the air bases and then attack Iran directly without refueling, without having to fly over other people's airspace, without having to get permission by the United States. Okay? Like, this is important. Logistically, it's very important. I mean, the Israelis have been able to do a lot of things, right? So Erdogan being there tamps a lot of that down. It's not the solution. It's part of the solution. The other part of the solution is freeing up global shipping, getting rid of the Houthis. Like, Hezbollah's gone. If Erdogan is effectively stopping the flow of new weapons into the Levant, now Israel is mostly stabilized. You have the Russians over here giving fifth-generation airframes to the Iranians. They're not just flying F-4s that the Shah got from us back in the 50s, which is what the Iranian Air Force was an oxymoron. Okay. But now they have missile defense. Now they have air defenses. Now they have fifth generation. Now they're getting fifth generation airframes. Now. So now all of a sudden, Iran is getting stabilized with the Russians on the one side, but at the same time neutered in their ability to project force. Right? The same thing is happening in Israel. And the whole region and the Arab states, like the rest of the Gulf Cooperation Council and the Arab League, are now moving in to assist Trump and buy into how they're going to fix the situation with Gaza. See, Trump comes in and says, hey, we need to figure out a way to rebuild this thing. Witkoff, again, in his interview with Tucker Carlson, everybody focuses on all the things that everything I saw is people focusing in on all the things that on all of Witkoff's naivete, but they missed all the big stuff, which is that Trump is outcome focused first. I want this outcome. How do we get there? Well, that's complicated. They have an idea of how they get there when they walked into the negotiations, both with the Russians and with Iran and with Israel, with an idea of how to do that. And that idea was wrong. Right? But they're going to continue the process of the negotiation and get better at this stuff, I think, over time. Because remember, we had up until, I don't know, a few weeks ago, we had an intelligence apparatus in the United States that was designed from the ground up to feed the worst information imaginable to the president of the United States. Most of that is still in place. It's only been a couple of months. You think that an edifice like that stretches back to the 1940s is going to be undone just because now all of a sudden Tulsi Gabbard is DNI? Or do you think that might take a few months? You might think that they take a few years. To fix the information siloing, to fix the way information passes up the chain. It's going to take a while. And so what you have to do is not take a knee-jerk reaction to things that are individual, things that are said here, things that are said there, or what, I mean, I literally had people calling Witkoff a freaking Zionist. I'm like, okay. You need to take a fucking step back. I'm not saying that he doesn't have a bias towards Israel, but that does not make him a Zionist. What that makes him is somebody who has imperfect understanding of what's going on in the world. But as a diplomat, he's trying to figure out what to do. And the problem now is that everybody trusts the whole process so little that the trust is so low amongst both parties and the observers, us, of the process, that no one can make, that everybody is just spouting their ab reactions into the void on Twitter or on, podcasts like this and all the rest of it. And I'm not saying that I'm any better than anybody else about this. I have my opinions. I do my best to try and balance them out as best I can. I don't want to see anybody killed. I don't want to. I want the wars to stop and like everybody else does. But taking a maximalist position on that, given the players at the table, is unrealistic. It just is. So what I've seen so far is that what the Americans are trying to do is now under Trump is to try and start the process of building trust and building lines of communication that weren't there 6 months ago. That's going to take a while. And when you have implacable assholes like the Brits, the Ukrainians, the Europeans, and others, and members of Israel and members of Iran's deep state as well, refusing to move off of their maximalist positions, it's going to be an ugly, unsettled time period.
But can Iran trust an agreement brokered by the United States after
with Russia
Trump
guaranteeing
tore up the JCPOA?
With Putin standing behind it, yes, I think, but it'll come with Trump being able to forge an agreement with Putin over Ukraine and getting it to stick. Because if he does that, then Iran will be able to look at him as a rational actor. Okay. So no one here is going to back down. Everybody is going to continue to violate ceasefires and act, they're all going to do this. The Iranians are going to do it. The Israelis are going to do it. The British are going to do it. The French are going to do it. The Ukrainians are going to do it. And the Russians are going to do it because no one trusts each other enough to stop operations. But if you can agree on certain little points and you can start to build trust in certain areas, well, hey, that's a good start. Let's start there because right now it's bad. So any positive movement should be celebrated, and we should not be thinking in terms of end goals as the only definition of winning, because that's not how diplomacy works. We haven't done diplomacy.
How do you think it turns out?
We don't even know what it looks like. What's that?
Yeah. How do you think it turns out at the end? How do you think you look at? How do you think it looks at the end? Because we're both sitting on you and here pontificating on Witkoff's true intentions, Trump's true intentions, but it's a far more complicated system. Many things can go wrong in the process. If you had to bet $1, where do you think we end up? You said you don't think we're going to end up in a war with Iran.
The three strongest people at the table, okay, after all of this said and done, is Russia, the U.S., and China. What they want, they're going to get. So let's watch how things go on May 9th when Trump goes to the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day.
Oh, he's going. He's confirmed.
As far as I understand, he's going. Let's see how that goes. Right? Will the Ukrainians try and bomb the damn thing? Am I Italian? Are they Ukrainian? Are the British the British? Of course they're going to try and turn it into an incident. But if there's an attempt on Trump's life or on Putin's life that day in order to embarrass all that, I can tell you right now, that will be Europe's Waterloo. And I'm using that phrase specifically to get up the ass of Frenchmen in the audience. That will be the next Waterloo. You will not survive this. Because then you're going to unleash the real anger of the United States. And if you fucking think that your 4 goddamn nukes are going to stop us, you're out of your fucking minds. So y'all better think very carefully about where you're going with all of this. I'm speaking now directly to Davos and those assholes in 10 Downing Street and at the European Council and the European Commission.
What better way to end the show?
Really watch your fucking ass here and in Kiev. And Zelensky's off the fucking rails, dude. Because cocaine makes you do dumb shit.
What better way to end the show than with a litany of threats against the EU and Davos than from Tom Luongo? So,
sorry,
I think we've hit the peak here, Tom. Let's take it home. Tom, where can people find you?
As always, you can find me on Twitter, TFL1728. You can follow me on Patreon at Patreon/Gold Goats and Guns. You can sign up for just the market reports or the monthly newsletter where Dexter and I knock it out of the park, in my opinion, every month. The service is cheap, probably too cheap. So, support us there. And then goldgoatsandguns.com is where you can find the podcast and all the rest of it. So there you go.
All right. Well, Tom, thanks for coming on. Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you got value out of this content, be sure to give us a like and comment "Go Tom Go" in the comment section. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an episode. If you disagreed with anything we talked about, for sure, leave us a comment. I do read your comments here, guys. Very interesting. Yeah. So very interested in getting your take. And then what else do I need to plug? Oh, my Substack, capitalcosm.substack.com, where you can get early access, ad-free versions and uncensored versions for all of my videos, especially the ones that warrant it. And check out our good partners over at Pimbex, PIMBEX.com for all of your gold and silver buying needs. Really gotten a chance to know these guys over the last few months, and I've got to tell you, you're not going to find a better group of gold and silver dealers out there. So with all that said, thank you guys for watching. I will catch you in the next episode. Bye, y'all.